Cooper with the Canine Chronicle, bringing you Table Talk Live with Kris Harner, who should be out on Cabo somewhere having a vacation after her successful cluster back in July. Kris, first of all, congratulations to you and all the volunteers of the Foothills Cluster for an amazing show in some challenging times.
Thank you.
You're one of the leaders of the pack here, showing others that it's possible, it can be done, and it can be done safely. So, way to go. And thank you for agreeing to share some of your experience with us. There's a couple of things we're going to talk about today. One of them is the dog show and how it differed this year in getting it off the ground than normal years. But the other thing is a survey that you sent out to all of your exhibitors, and we'll talk a little bit about how you did your survey, why you did your survey, what the goals were, and most importantly, what that survey told you.
Correct.
So let's start out by talking a little bit about the dog show. You had the same dates that you usually do. You held your dates and you held your venue.
Correct.
But those might be a couple of the only things that kind of stuck as status quo. So when you tried to get your show off the ground, what did you have to do to make the show happen?
Well, the first thing I had to do is really work extensively with the general managers and the people at the convention center that work with us on a regular basis. They understand our event. They know our event. We've been with them for decades. So they're very aware of the dog show. We also spend a lot of time working with our visitor center, who now does understand our dog show better than ever from past experiences with them. So having those two on board was huge for us because they knew what we were doing and how we could run it safely in order to get things going in our community. But they also know that what we also brought to the community was helping with jobs locally. So they were very much behind and wanting me to keep this going forward. And every time I contacted them, they were worried I was going to say we were canceling, and they were more encouraged by all the things that I was doing ahead of time. So I spent time writing emails to the governor, and and copied them on it. And every time I copied any kind of correspondence with city officials, they would forward it to who they think were the appropriate people to forward it to. And that was huge because they know the people that we need to influence and who we needed to talk to. And that was probably our biggest thing because they were always very thankful and thought that my response and my requests for holding the event or whether the event would be possible was so well written that they thought it would sell itself very well. So they were very encouraged by that alone.
So we're talking about education, are we not? Are we talking? Correct. I mean, we're talking about helping these officials who are actually have the ultimate approval of whether the show goes or not understand what event it is that they're approving.
Right. That's very true. Because if they don't know what the event is and what it's about, it's easy for them to say no. Your officials are all elected officials, so they have to worry about what their constituents think about these events. And that's where you have to make certain that they understand what you're doing is safe for their community. That's not going to affect their elections down the road.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say were, the things that worked the best in terms of helping your event run smoothly, yet satisfying the COVID-19 precautions?
Well, I think the biggest thing I would say is making certain that we recognize what the community was looking for. They had been talking quite often on our news locally about our numbers increasing. They're concerned that people aren't wearing masks and not social distancing, and that was their big concern. So to me, I had to put in those kind of things in place to say, hey, we will, as our community, our dog show community, will comply with what you're looking for our community to do. So we put in place requiring masks in the building at all times, whether you're in your setup area, whether you're in the ring, whether you're just walking around. And we also required the social distancing. So we did put in place things that would allow that by changing our grooming area so that you had your own space that exited to an aisle so you wouldn't have to walk through somebody else's setup. Everybody had space according to how many dogs they had entered and what they needed. We also made certain we put in place our ways of hand sanitizer. So we provided hand sanitizer outside of the groups of rings that we had, and the convention center actually supplied them at every door that you would go in or out of. So they were also complying with things that they were requested to do based on restaurant hotel management that they put in place for them to do. And so they did comply with making certain all the doors that we use had hand sanitizers at it. And then we provided additional ones that people might be at the ring, might go, oh, I could really use some hand sanitizer. I touched that, I picked up something on the floor that somebody dropped and I handed it to them. I wanted to use it. So we made certain that was there. We also put in place sanitizing and disinfecting the rings. And we use a product that would only need 10 minutes of time between. So anytime we saw a ring had 10 minutes between breeds or a downtime, we were spraying those rings with a sanitizer that only takes about 5 minutes to actually do the job it's supposed to do for preventing the spread of viruses, but it took 10 minutes to make certain it was dry and safe to run on. This product's safe for dogs to touch, but it's the moisture, the mats being that somebody doesn't slip and slide. So make sure we're out of that. So those are the things that we put in place.
Would you say that there are things that you changed like on a daily basis? I mean, did you evaluate it every day and some things you needed to tweak?
Yep.
Give a couple examples of things you tweaked, like from day 1 to day 2.
Sure. So day 1, we had already set up ringside crating area. And that first day, it was very obvious it wasn't enough because there was crowded areas at some of the rings, depending on what rings were, but we saw crowding areas. So we added additional area to say, this is where ringside crating is to give you more space. That was the first one. The second one, we found the group rings were, we had already asked them to split them, but some of the judges weren't making cuts. So we made certain they made cuts so that they didn't have to bring everybody back in, and that would help those rings not have crowding in them throughout the time. The bigger thing we ran into was making certain people understood where 6 feet back from the ring was. We didn't have clear lines around every part of the ring, so we added extra rings, extra marks to tell people where they could go.
Got it. All right. So, I think it's an ever-evolving process, right?
Absolutely.
You have a big building. So, and your entry this year, you limited it to what?
2,000 per day.
And that differs from last year by what?
About 500 dogs.
Okay. But I think there were other events in addition to that smaller entry.
Correct.
There were other things that you didn't have this year to try to allow for more space, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we did cancel the obedience and rally, which would allow us to open up all of our hall 2. So we use 2 halls that the convention center has, which is 280,000 square feet. Each hall has a 10,000 person capacity, so they're about the same size. One's a tad bigger than the other. Our smaller of the 2 buildings are not, and I say small, they're not really small, but we normally only use half of it for confirmation. The other half, we kind of have a blank space that we don't use anything in it, and then we have our obedience and rally rings. By eliminating obedience and rally, it opened up that entire building for using for confirmation, which we knew we could easily put another 500 dogs in our building, but to be on the safe side, we rather that our community knew that it was safe and not pushing the limit of what we could do. Our building obviously could hold way more dogs than we limited it to, but we wanted to make certain that they were comfortable if they walked in the building.
Mm-hmm. The feedback that I got from everyone was that everyone felt safe. And I think, when you see someone making an effort to spray rings down every time that they're vacant, and, you see, sanitizing stations, all around you, it does give one a feeling of safety when, there are marks that say you don't go past this line.
Right.
Everyone's wearing their mask, and people then get a feeling of safety, which is great. And it was an overwhelming response of people that went to your show, and quite frankly, I think a lot of people were intimidated because that was one of the first. And once again,
and indoors
right. indoors in July.
In July.
In April. So thumbs up to you. So let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
you then decided you needed to do, or you wanted to do a survey to get some data.
Right.
And your primary goal in this survey was what?
The primary goal was to prove that we could hold an event safely and it be successful. That was the main goal, because I had heard people say, well, you don't know if that event was safe because you don't have any follow-up data. So we decided a couple of months before our show to do that. So we had already asked MBF for a file of all the email addresses for all of our entries. And they sent that to me before the show even started. So we had in place that we were going to do the survey, but we chose to wait until 2 weeks after the show because that was the incubation period for COVID, and we wanted to be sure that we didn't have a bunch of people who got sick.
And what did you use for your survey?
We used SurveyMonkey.
Okay.
Which is a free survey. The one thing is that it does limit it to 10 questions. So we had to compile our questions into 10. And we did realize we missed some key questions for the information we were looking for, but we also got a lot of information out of it.
Got it. And what would you say your, what was your answer? I mean, your goal was to see if you could hold an event safely, see if everyone felt safe, and what was the answer?
The answer was the protocols we had in place obviously must have worked.
Okay.
And that was what we wanted, to show that we could have an event, a large event, and it be safe and not cause a huge increase in COVID cases.
So you had 1,000, I believe, email addresses that you sent out.
I think it was 1,200.
Okay, and you got 570 some responses to your survey.
Right.
So I mean that's a decent response. But I'd like to take this opportunity to ask everyone that's watching that if other clubs do surveys like this, it would be extremely helpful to just take the 5 or 10 minutes to respond to it, because this is all data that can be used as we try to continue to rebuild our sport back to where it was. It's key because it's another information, it's a data point that can be used. People can point back to this survey and say, there was a 2,000 dog show in Greenville, South Carolina in July, or a survey was done, and we can comfortably say that COVID-19 was not spread as a result of the event.
Right.
So, I mean, and that's a great piece of information and a great piece of data to have. And also what it says to all of those who said that they felt safe at your event was they should have felt safe because they were. So, right? I mean, that's basically where it is. So tell me, if you had one piece of advice to give other show chairs that are contemplating having a dog show and how to do it, what would it be?
My biggest advice would be, one, think about what the community is going to think about it. So look to your community. If they're going to say 1,000 people in one place is too many people, how can you make sure that they understand it's a safe place? And it's an event that can be held safely without spreading and causing problems within the community. I think that's the key, is obviously working to the community to see them find positive in holding the event. One, it's safe. Two, it brings economic impact to your area. And that's what they want to see, is impact that doesn't impact their COVID numbers.
Right. But I mean, I think, and you and I talked about this earlier, and it's something, once again, that I think we need to make other people understand, and that is the primary data point in trying to get these events approved by regulatory agencies is education. It's what is a dog show? What do we do? How do we do it? How can we do it safely?
Right.
And, these are things that a lot of community officials do not understand what a dog show is. I mean, I've heard things like they thought it was, comparable to a flea market. I've heard, that it's comparable to a festival. I've heard so many different things, and all of those things really can't promote social distancing, but our environment, and it's repeat people, quite frankly, it's key. These are key data points that people should consider offering to their community. What the dollar amount, what is the economic impact to your community, because that gets the elected officials thinking.
Right.
As they,
when you talk about that, because education is probably the biggest thing, and you can try doing it after you're getting to an event. The key is try to do it ahead of time. Our club spends a lot of time with our community anyhow, helping when there's a dog park being released or to help with Responsible Ownership Day, but also developing a relationship with your visit centers who see hotels, restaurant impact. They're looking at that, and so they look at it going, hey, this does really have it. And they need some valid information about what your event does for their community. So then they fight for you with the city officials. And that's a lot of times you don't realize you may not get to talk to that city manager or the health risk management team, which we spent time with them, but it was because of the connection of people we have in the community that got us that interaction. If we didn't have that interaction, it would have been a much harder to sell that this event was something that could be positive for our community.
Have you shared the survey results with your community officials?
Yes. And they were ecstatic to see it and very appreciative to say we allowed an event that was successful. So everything I've gotten from them has been positive. And even our convention center sent it to the organization that heads all of convention centers across the United States, and they were very impressed with the data, thinking that with that data, it would help other convention centers across the United States to say, maybe we can allow this event, or maybe we can allow large events that can do social distancing and can put protocols in place to make it safe. I think that's the key, is they want to know the event that they're going to approve can have protocols in place to make it safe.
Well, Kris, I thank you so much for all of your hard work, because I can't imagine. I know that, I've helped Nina with the Lima shows, and the constant back and forth was, overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I know it's a lot of work without COVID. So with COVID, it's definitely not for the faint of heart, if you will. I know that you've expressed a willingness publicly to have people, get in touch with you if they need a little bit of help.
Yep.
You and I have talked about you sharing, the survey with me and other pieces of information other clubs can use going forward to try to get their events approved. So folks, you can reach out to me, and I will be happy to share information with you. And Kris has made herself available as well. So Kris, again, congrats. Thank you so much. And everyone, we will see you soon as we get back to more normal dog shows going forward.
Thank you.